I have only one machine, but I hope it works. And the picture you see here is a waterfall. It's a waterfall someplace in a mountain in northern Laos. And I use that as an introduction to my little presentation here, which I call Visualizing the Unknown. Of course, the unknown music in this case. Because how do you do that when you don't actually know anything about the thing that you study? And with the subtitle Transcription in Ethnomusicology. I worked for many years with a man called Kham Rao, who was born in Laos. He was born in a village of the Khmu people, and he happened to end up in Lund in Sweden for many years. He was a good singer, and he knew lots of things in his own culture. When he got a little bit older, he made a very long poem about the natural surroundings of his home village. And one of the poems, part of the poem is about the waterfalls. He speaks about the waterfalls that sounds a lot, and they're a good place for singing. Maybe it is like singing in the shower, like we like to do. So there are special songs that you sing when you come close to a waterfall. Then there are more to it than that, really. This is a sort of visualization or transcription, if you like, of a kind of tune that he would sing in that situation. And only graphical, we call macro perspective, that is trying to show the whole song. And some parts of it are in thick black. Those are repeated the same all over. The other parts are changed. There are different words, sometimes traditional poems put in there, sometimes improvised words. So occasionally one part, as you will hear, will become longer. We will listen to a bit of this recording, and it starts up there, it goes into the second part, and after that, the second kind of part of this melodic formula repeats, but is prolonged. And we drew this picture together many years ago when we sat down talking about this kind of melody. And then after that, I worked it out a bit. But the original sketch we did together. So that was his perception of the melody. And he used the waterfall picture. So the beginning of the song, that is the waterfall. When the melody slows down and comes to in a low position and rolls on, that's the whirlpool that happens after the waterfall. And then, of course, since this is a mountain, the water has to continue somewhere, so it falls at the end.
Con đi với gầy xa sa ta ca ta cum po sa ta ca ta răng am ngày xa sa mê rò đô mốc gơ ki tay prơ yong ta ngõ ta pưng ca nê sa mê tinh căng đừng ki ta ram ta pưng ca tay prơ yong ngày xa tên là cắt lưới đấy.
So these are two people, and it will continue with the other person replying to this song, and they can keep on forever changing and improvising on this theme. So this is a sort of graphic representation that has some bearing to the way that he understood or visualized the melody. And it's not unique, actually, to the Khmu. Maybe it's more common than we think. This is a report from Papua New Guinea by Stephen Feld, who works with music and language for the Kaluli people. and they use waterfall terminology. The metaphors are about waterfalls. So then the area of ethnomusicology, here are a couple of definitions. They're quite vague, actually. But this says something about what we do, the study of music in culture, or the study of music in the context of human life. Usually it started out as studies of foreign places from that of the researcher, or minority in the homeland. This is a picture of Frances Densmore. We are in America, and she has recorded the mountain chief of the Blackfoot people in 1914. He is now interpreting the song with a sign language for her. And at that time, around 1900, the material they used for recording was the phonograph, and the material they used for analyzing the recordings also came from the wax cylinders, and it could have sounded something like this. And the early ethnomusicologists, they had to find ways to describe this music in order to be able to analyze it. And one was using graphs of different kinds. Another one was using musical notation and adding signs to that system so it could be used for describing the kind of sounds that you didn't need until then in the notation systems. And notation is and has been used very much, still is, in ethnomusicology. It has the fact is that transcription is a very individual thing. People hear, even those who specialize and are educated in the science, hear things differently, and they write them down differently. And the same with the people who read these things, even if they are also specialists, they will interpret them in their own ways. So there's a degree of subjectivity, of course, in this. And this picture shows 4 different transcriptions of the same part of a Swedish polska. And you can see it's basically the same melodic line, but the details differ a lot. But there could be more differences than this. Still, notation for people who work with music is a very quick way of communicating. It works because it's musically meaningful. And actually, notation was used quite early by linguists, people who worked with language research. These pictures come from 1779. It's an expanded music staff that has all the semitones in between the major lines. And so this was an attempt to capture a sentence and the intonation of the sentence. Especially for linguistic tones, some languages have differences in word tones or lexical tones that changes the meaning of words. Graphic systems or notations have been used. My recording here is not the same word as in the notated frame, but it's the same tones.
My.
And you might say that they were not exact, the notes are not exact. And that is true. In the beginning of the last century, they started to use mechanical transcriptions. The chimograph was a machine that had a similar mouthpiece as the one that you used now. Maybe those things are related historically, I don't know. And by that one, it could be used for many things, but it could be used for vocal sounds, and you could get graphs on a paper like this. And so this graph show 5 tones of Thai, and from top to down, the ones you can see are high, rising, middle, falling, and depressed. You can see they cross over a little bit, and they are not. High is not highest of all. There is direction, and many things differ. So this is a more than exact visualization of the tones. This methodology was developed into machines that could produce spectrograms and different sort of visualizations. This is maybe the first one that was used for music. It was called the melograph and was constructed in the early 1950s by Charles Seeger, an American ethnomusicologist, or musicologist, maybe we should say. And here is the standard picture had the lowest lines or the amplitude, that's a volume. And the one that is very difficult, hard to see, that is the fundamental, the melody that we perceive. And there's a transcription on top. There are some little lines on the lowest curve, and they are the timing markers that they can use for getting an idea about a rhythm. But also this, of course, is needs to be interpreted. So when looking at the mechanical transcription, the strip of paper that comes out, somebody has to figure out what does it mean what does it say really, and if we notate it, how do we notate it? Because this will be much more detailed than what you usually care for when you listen. In Sweden too, a similar machine was constructed in Uppsala in the early 1960s. And this is one strip of paper that continues in the lower part of the picture. First you can see the pitches and the amplitude at the bottom, that's the loudness. And the melody starts with a high-pitched tone on top and continues down here. And it has been notated approximately on the side. I don't have the sound recording, so I cannot compare it. I cannot let you compare it. But that is how it worked. And at that time, if you worked with monophonic music by one voice or one instrument, and you were located in Lund, like I was, you had to send an open reel tape to Uppsala, and it took a while, and then you got lots of paper strips back that you rolled out on the floor and put things on so they wouldn't roll together. And if you were unlucky, the filter cut the voice, so you needed 2 papers to get one picture. And then you try to figure out what does this say. And it was very interesting. This is one way that this kind of transcription was used in analysis. This is a Joik, a Samish song, and you can see the fundamental here put into music staff, the 5 lines, approximated, of course, and then on top, possible one way to notate the thing. This made possible to catch more details in the performances. And sometimes one of the difficulties was separating too many details from the main thing that you wanted to study. Nowadays, then, we don't have to depend on paper strips to get that sort of transcription. You can get it free on the internet. This is a section of from a software called Prof, used very much by linguists, but also increasingly by musicologists. And the short piece that is illustrated here is animal song from interior Alaska, a place called Minto, and where the Native Americans keep their tradition to a certain degree. In this program, in this software, you can do many things. So there are 6 different lines down there. On top is the fundamental in blue, and then you can see the loudness of the sounds. But below there are 6 lines, and you can add as many as you want and put in additional information about that piece. But you cannot put in musical notes, unfortunately. The song here is something we worked with in a project I finished last year. We called it In the Borderland Between Song and Speech. I mean, it's an animal song, short, very short, from a tale. And recording is no longer done with phonograph, of course. Working with this, I found another software, the one you mentioned, called Melodyne. It's not free, unfortunately. Melodyne is a software similar to one called Autotone that has been produced in order to correct singing when you make recordings in studios. You can hear it a lot on the radio, and if you listen carefully, you know when it's used. So in that way, I don't know if that is what Madonna did in the Eurovision contest last week, but she has there's now a video on YouTube where she's singing perfectly in key. Anyway, I don't use it like that. I use it the other way around. I don't want to change. My job is not to change the original. I want to figure out what is it? What does it sound like? So here's the same little piece in Melodyne. And you can set it so that you get a scale of semitones on the left side. You can get notation. It works for very clear and simple melodies, but otherwise it becomes very mixed up and is not really useful for my ends. But the software as such is, whereas the Prat and similar software is built on segmentation. You take a segment and you study it carefully and you add another segment, and then later on you could add many of them together. This one gives you the totality. You can get a whole piece. It doesn't matter how long it is. And you can work from there. So it is, for me who approach this as a musicologist, it feels intuitively very useful. You sort of can watch it and you can listen. I could play it in real time, but I will not take the risk, so I have prepared. The man we listened to at the beginning, Kam, he had a large repertoire of songs, and here's one that is like a sort of recitation, you could say. The way I've written it here is, we do that sometimes, is notation, but you see the stuff start at different places, and that is because this one is built on the end of the phrases, not the beginning. All of the phrases end in a similar way. If there are more words put into a line, it becomes longer, not at the end, but in the middle or in the beginning. So they are lined together like this.
Nàng mình rơi mà mòn on chân nàng con men on chút, chân nàng mình rơi mà mòn on chân nàng con men on nhờ.
And taking this one in Melodyne, it has it shows clearly one thing in the Khmu language, that is they have 2 word tones, one low and one high. And apart from the very lowest beginning, you can see the encircled ones, they are the high word tones, and they become very, very obvious.
Nang men trema mon on jan nang kon men on chut. Nang men trema mon on jan nang kon men on yol.
And this is from the linguist point of view, fixing together a transcription from many part sections. So what we have done in our work with visualizations of the songs or the music we study is to use many different ways of transcription or visualization. Starting with the waterfall melody here. This is a normal notation, musical notation. There are two performances compared to each other in that one. This is done from the linguistic point of view, and the idea with this one is to measure the word tones and how they slide up or down or are stable. This is another graphic representation, and here the shaded areas above or below the melody line, they show where the pitch could happen to occur if the words had a different word tone. So it's sort of a band where they occur. And this is a piece of that sort of graph compared to linguist analysis where the word tones and the details of the word tones are presented. And then this is a melodyne of the same song, and we can see it portrays the waterfall quite clearly. So, but what we have to do here, we have to make. There's no software, there's no machine that we can put a song in one end and we get a full visualization, perfect visualization at the other end. It doesn't exist, as far as I know. Tell me if there is one. So instead, we have to work in many different ways, and we have to interpolate between them and try to analyze and arrive at some sort of conclusions. So in that way, some of these transcriptions, most of them, we made for ourselves in order to understand better, in order to communicate with each other. Because if you are different people, especially if you have a different scientific background, it's not self-evident that you're speaking about the same thing. So you have to tell your fellow researchers what you want to tell them, what you want them to know. And so we communicate back and forth and try to combine the perspectives. When I take this together, of course, visualizations are useful, they're very, very useful, but there are some things you need to think of. And one is, as I said in the beginning, that the visualization and also the reception of it is very individual. And you cannot predict the outcome totally. The choice of type of visualization when we do research in ethnomusicology depends on the aims. Description of a performance is one sort of aim. You want to describe what this sounds like so that another musician can understand it, for example. Communication with fellow researchers, as I mentioned, is another aim. And then that goes for another technique of visualization. Communication with the reader, if you publish your results and want to spread them, that's still another aim, and it has special demands on the kind of visualization you use. Another matter that's begun to interest me is what is the minimum precision we need and what is sufficient precision. It may be that the reason we don't have the perfect machine that could do all this for us is that we want to do it just right and perfectly. Maybe if we set up the limits, it could, software or whatever could be constructed according to rules developed from there. But that is not really my division. So I will finish here. And if there are any questions, you're very welcome.